Our intervals, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time looking at the F Lydian mode, focusing on centering around measuring from the F note located on the 5th string down from the top of the guitar, fret number 6. This is part number 2. One of our major objectives is to orientate all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar, who is of course located behind the guitar. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but no, we just flipped it around to mirror your perspective from behind your guitar as though you were playing it into a mirror. Similarly, our Excel spreadsheet will be representing the fretboard, this representing the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, orientated as though we just took our guitar and imprinted the strings on the screen. We're now going to be doing our interval practice around this F note using the same shape we've been using before, which we'll talk more about shortly, but that basically means we're going to be constructing a Lydian mode. So I want to go into a quick overview on why we're going to go through the exercise and why we would want to learn the Lydian mode in particular from the bottom of the guitar, noting that I know I've kind of reviewed this in the prior presentation, so I'm going to take a little bit different of a perspective here, focusing more on why we want to learn the mode numbering system and how that can help us basically build chords as we play in different modes other than in the major scale. So I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on that. So if I go back up top again, remember that we're compare everything to the major scale. And one of the problems, by the way, of comparing everything to the major scale in Western music is oftentimes people don't actually get away from the major scale because they've learned everything from the perspective of the major scale. What we want to be able to do is say the major scale is our Rosetta Stone. It's the thing, it's our home base. It's like a child that has their home base as their mom, right? And they kind of go around their mom, but they can then reach out further than that because they have the safe home to go back to, right? We want to do a similar thing where we're exploring outwards instead of being stuck within the same spot, because that's basically the safe zone. So that's going to be the thing that the tool that we use to learn basically the other modes from other perspectives. And so we can group things in our mind together, and that's going to be another concept that I think is really useful in music theory in general and in guitar in particular, that being, how can I pack as much information in my mind in a way that basically makes sense? Is it going to be rogue memory? Am I just going to rogue memorize like 300 scales? Possibly that's not the way you want to go. The way we want to go then usually is to relate things, link them in our mind to things we already know. That's why we tell stories. That's why we have the acronyms, and that's why we use analogies. So that's the way I want to, that I particularly try to think about how to add new information. I try to say, what do I know? How can I tack on the new information to what I know? How could I learn things in groups? So instead of learning 300 things, I learn them in groups, breaking them down to 100 things or something, right? It's a smaller number of things with groups. Well, we can, of course, learn these 7 scales by grouping them under the category of, in essence, the key of the major scale, because they have all the same notes. It's just a matter of where the starting point is within each of them. And that's one way that we can learn things. Now, the other way, when we look at the shapes, we can learn the fretboard by putting all those notes on the fretboard, breaking the fretboard out into basically 5 shapes, which perfectly fit my hand. That's why the guitar's built that way. And then we can name those shapes basically with a numbering system, or possibly the caged system, which is simply taking the open position shapes and moving them up the fretboard. But even the caged system for most people is designed based on the major scale, meaning if I'm going to call this shape, I would call it shape number 1, but if you name it by the caged system, you'd have to look for the related major scale, C major, and see that there's a G shape to make that C major. So it's a G-shaped major, a G-shaped C major position, right? But that makes it a little bit more difficult for me to say, well, what if I'm not playing in the major scale? What if I'm playing in Dorian or Phrygian or Lydian and so on and so forth? I want to be able to see that the same shape also can be representing any of the modes. It just depends on where we start the shape, because again, all the notes are the same. So then we of course can also learn by using what I call the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, which once again, we always learn from the perspective of the major scale oftentimes. And that's great, but I'd like to learn it from the other positions as well. So once again, I can start anywhere, not from the top of the shape. Now notice the benefit of learning the formula is that I'm not stuck to this shape then, right? I don't have to be in this shape. I can actually break out of the shape because I know the formula of whole, whole, half, which is more easily seen on one string. Although you can see it on multiple strings if we know the distance between the two strings, being 5 notes typically, unless it's 4 notes between these two strings. So that gives us an ability to see the fretboard differently, possibly breaking out of these normal pattern boxes from time to time when we want to do that. We want to be able to switch our mind between those things. And then of course we can learn by interval, which is what we are doing now, which is particularly good. That means we're going to choose a point and measure around that point, which is particularly good for chord construction ideas. So that means that I can, so if I learn this on the major, this shape then, we can usually see the shape. If I was to play it, I would call it shape number 1. So it's going to be, that would be pentatonic, 5 notes. That would be 7 notes. Usually if I play it that way, I'm playing from the A, which means I'm playing the related minor chord. And if I played it from the C, that would be the major. And that means that if I start on any point in here, I can think of it as any of these modes. If in essence, I think about the new tonic and I make that the tonic, any of these ones, the tonic. So that's why we can kind of pack all these shapes into one thing. Now, so you might think, well, what about the Lydian? Maybe I don't want to play in Lydian. Why would I want to learn the Lydian? Well, I want to emphasize the idea that we want to think about, in my mind, I'm trying to think about more of these modes as chords, right? Because even if I only play in like Ionian, the major scale, and Aeolian, the minor scale, I still want to know my full potential to play all the chords within that scale. So in other words, if I'm in the major scale, what are we going to do? We're going to say, here's the note in the major scale, all the colored notes. How do I know if I can build a chord off of those notes? Well, I know I can add a fifth almost all the time, so I can make a power chord almost all the time and add a fifth no matter which note in the scale I start from. That's great. But then when do I add the third? Because I want to add the third. Well, if it's the major scale, people start to memorize that the 1, 4, 5 are major chord constructions and therefore have a major third. The 2, 3, and 7, the 2, 3, and 6 have minor chord constructions, and then the 7 has a minor and a flat 5. So we start to kind of learn that in relation to the major scale. But that doesn't really convert too well if I go to the Dorian, and now I have my relative positions have all changed. It's not too good for me to know anything beyond the third, because if all I know is that the 1, 4, 5 are major chord constructions, I don't know the difference between what I can do on the 1, 4, 5 from the perspective of a chord construction that is different, which would still have the same notes within the C major scale, right? Because once I get to the 7, 9, 11, and 13, the 9, 11, and 13 being equivalent to the even numbers we skipped for the most part, 2, 4, and 6, I don't know which of those I can add. I'm kind of in limbo because I have this, it's like a math trick, you know, when you're learning math in grade school and you come up with this cool thing that's a shortcut to the procedure. But the reason they don't teach you the shortcut to the procedure is because it doesn't work all the time, right? If you go to another thing, it's not going to work anymore. So you learn something that only works sometime, which might be cool because you can use it in particular situations. But if you don't know when you can't use it, then you have a problem, right? And you can't use that convention to know the 7, 9, 11, and 13. How could I know when the 7? Well, then we have to learn each of them, right? I'd have to learn each of them by either modal name, or I would come up with a numbering system. So in other words, when I get to this 4 chord, I want to know that I can build a major. I want to know if I build a major third or a minor third. I know it's the 4th Therefore, I'm going to have a major third. I'd also like to know the 7, 9, 11, and 13 so that I can build a more complex chord around it if I wanted to, even if I'm playing in the key of C major. So the way I can know that is to know that it's actually a Lydian mode. And when I think of a Lydian mode in perspective to the major scale, so I'm playing in C major, but then I get to the 4. The 4 to me is the Lydian, right? I'm going to call it mode number 4 is the Lydian. So I can call it a Lydian chord, basically. It's a Lydian chord, meaning I have all of these notes available to me, all of these intervals available to me to play something that is in that chord shape that is still in the same key as the related C major. In other words, I'm not switching to F major. I could do that. I could go from C major and then switch entirely not to F Lydian, another major mode that would be in the same key, but to F major, and just change everything, which would be parallel. That would be like a parallel chord construction because all the shapes would be entirely the same as I go from one to the other. But the other alternative would be I want to stay in the same key using all the same notes as the C major, and then when I go to the 4, I want to play something that is entirely congruent, having the same notes in the C major, which does include the same 1, 3, 5, as though I switched to F major, but doesn't include the same 7, 9, 11, and 13, which is equivalent to the 7, 2, 4, and 6. So in other words, how can I do that? Well, even if I'm playing in the C major, I'd like to be able to say the 1, 4, 5 is really mode number 1, mode chord number 5, mode chord number 4, and mode number 5, which converts to the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. So when I get to the 5, I'm going to say it's the 1, 4, 5. It's also mode 5 or modal chord number 5, which means that's the Mixolydian, right? And that means that I know that I have the 7 has like the dominant 7 in it, right? And all the other intervals are the same. So, and if I do that, if I name these modes and I think of them as modal chords, like this is the Dorian modal chord. This is the Phrygian modal chord. They happen to have the same 1, 3, 5 as a minor because they have a minor third, but they don't have the same 7, 9, 11, and 13 possibly, right? So if I learn them individually, then I have more flexibility to go beyond the 1, 3, 5 when I do chord constructions, even if I'm not playing in Dorian, but I'm just playing a Dorian modal chord is the way I would want to think of it, right? So then if I played, say, in Dorian, then I'm going to use the same numbering system as is compared to the major scale to number the chords. So in other words, if I'm playing in Dorian, same notes over here as D Dorian and C major, but the relative positions have changed. The 1 is not a C anymore. The C is now the 7 because the Dorian starts on relative position 2. So everything's shifted down. So the problem is if I'm in the Dorian, if I'm playing in Dorian, then I say 1, 4, 5. I'm like, okay, I'm going to play the 1, 4, 5 in the Dorian. Well, what does that mean? Because I can no longer use the cheating convention that I can use in C major, memorizing that the 1, 4, 5 are the ones that I can build a major chord from, and the 2, the 2, 3, and 6 are the minor chords. I can't do that, right? Because now the relative positions have shifted. But if I can say that I'm in Dorian, which is modal chord number 2 in relation to the major scale, then I can say, well, I know the Dorian is mode number 2. I can not only know that it's relative position 2, which means I'm going to play a minor chord around it, a minor third, but I also know it's a Dorian, which has the distinctive, I believe, 6th, right? So if I want to build a longer chord from it, and then if I build the 1, 4, 5, what is the 4? Well, the 4 is now the relative position 4 of the Dorian is equivalent to the 5 because everything got pushed down one number. I'm starting on 2 instead of on 1, right? So when I get to the relative position 4 from an absolute modal numbering system, I'm going to call that the 5 as it relates to the major scale. That telling me just from my cheat code the 5, the 1, 4, 5 has a major chord. That tells me it has a major third, so I can at least build a triad. But beyond that, I want to memorize that it's the Mixolydian, right? If I know it's the Mixolydian, then I also know that what 7 I can put in it, because I know the distinct intervals of the 7. So that's what we basically want. One reason you want to learn the modes is to see them as chords, longer chord constructions using all the notes in the chord with that as the root, so that even if you never play like in Lydian, I know that if I'm playing in Dorian or if I'm playing in, say, a minor scale and I get to the Lydian chord, so if I get to an F, if I get to the 6th and I'm playing in A minor, then I know that the 6th I build a Lydian chord off of it. In other words, right, the 6th is equivalent to mode number 4. So if I'm going to say I'm playing in A minor, I'm playing the 6th of A minor, that would be an F chord. I know that, but I also want to know that what is the relative position? What's the modal chord? The modal chord is what I would call mode number 4 chord, which is the Lydian, which I know that relative position 4 to the major scale has a major third, because the 1, 4, 5 has a major third. And I know also that it's the Lydian mode. It's the Lydian modal chord. So that means that I can go beyond, if I know all of the intervals of Lydian, I can go beyond just building a 1, 3, 5 and build a more complex chord on it. So that's kind of like the idea on why we want to do that. But as we do this as well, we're also just learning the intervals that are applicable to most of the shapes. So you'll note that as we go through the intervals, we're repeating a lot of the intervals, but we're repeating them on each string, so that we have different. So that it's different because when you're looking at a different string, you have a different amount of strings above it and below it. So it's useful then to repeat the intervals. So in other words, as we practice Lydian intervals, we're going to have all of the intervals will be the same as with the Ionian, except for the one interval difference. So that will allow us to reiterate all of the intervals, but on different strings as we go down the different strings, and to identify the differences between the intervals. Remembering the general idea is that if we look at the major scale, the major modes related to the major scale, the Ionian mode, are the Mixolydian and Lydian. They're only going to have one interval difference from the major scale. So the major scale has a 0 note away perfect first, a 2 note away major second, a 4 note away major third, a 5 note away perfect fourth, 7 note away perfect fifth, 9 note away major sixth, 11 note away major 7. If we go to the Lydian, then our point of focus here, it still has a 0 note away perfect first. It still has a 2 note away major second. That's what we would expect in a major scale. Also happens to be the same in a minor scale. And then we have the 4 note away major third. That's what we would expect. That's the interval that makes it a major mode and a major chord construction. But then we have the weird one, the 4, and it's named incorrectly in my worksheet because of the formulas I use. I'm not going to change it, but we have to just note that it says diminished fifth. That's what that stands for. But it should really be an augmented fourth, meaning I'm on the relative position 4. So the distance is 6 notes away. I could call that distance a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth. It should be called an augmented fourth because I need a fourth here, but I'm not going to mess up my formatting in Excel or make a really complicated formula, so we're going to deal with that. And then so that's the one interval that's different. And then we have the 7 note away perfect fifth, the 9 note away major 6. This one is the same on the major and the minor. The 9 note away major 6, which is what we would expect. That's on the major scale. It would be a minor 6 on the minor. The 11 note away major 7, that's what we would expect in a major mode. So notice the Lydian mode, if I measure around this F, it's the same. All the intervals are the same except for the fourth, which this one has an augmented fourth, which has the same distance as a diminished fifth. So if you adjust out one interval, you can easily go then from the F Lydian, which I might know just simply because I know this shape because I play in A minor a lot or in C major a lot, And then I'm saying, I want to, if I know this shape, I know that the F is the Lydian. So if I make that the tonic, then I would be playing in F Lydian. What if I wanted to convert to an F major? I should be easy to do that because there's only one interval difference. So instead of me saying, well, why don't I make this F like the same on the top here? I could find the F up here and then make this same structure here. That's what most people would do. Nothing wrong with that. But you could also say, I'm going to convert this shape by just basically saying I'm going to take that one interval that's different, the B right here, and it's augmented, so I'll flatten it, right? I can flatten all of these, and then I just converted that shape now to this shape, right? Which I would call position, I think, number 4, so, right? And so and then that's one way that I can expand from one shape to another. All right, that's enough. Let's go in and count this thing out. Let's do a quick joke first as we go. A little bit of a political joke here. So hopefully it's not, if you don't like that, you could fast forward here, but I need my joke practice. All right, here we go. Watching the corrupt Democratic Party lie after the mainstream of sewage media monopoly over the national narrative has completely shattered the mainstream of sewage media, having become completely impotent at this point. I mean, it's like watching that Monty Python Holy Grail scene where like the Black Knight keeps trying to fight with no arms. You know, he gets his arms cut off and he keeps on fighting.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Well, what's that then?
Like for example, recently the Democratic Party tried to pushing the lie that kicking a disruptive member out of Congress for not following procedure is just like the civil rights of the 1960s, for crying out loud. They're singing songs and whatnot, and it's like apparently they don't realize they have no propaganda arm to push a lie like that anymore. You know, I mean, seriously, you would need like an Incredible Hulk propaganda arm to push that kind of ludicrous narrative, and they're standing up there with no arms at all. They got no arms at all.
I've heard worse.
You liar!
Come on, you pansy!
They're looking like a beltless, suspenderless Mark Hamill giving a speech while his pants fall down on stage. Except that
Victory is mine. We thank thee, Lord, that in thy
Come on, then.
What?
How about you?
Except that the mainstream of sewage media doesn't even have the capacity to pull their pants back up because they've got no arms.
You are indeed brave, Sir Knight, but the fight is mine.
Oh, had enough, eh?
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left.
Yes, I have.
Look!
It's just a flesh wound.
They just stand up there continuing to lie in their tidy whities, seeming oblivious to their nakedness or their armlessness either. Both of them, they don't even realize they got no pants, they got no arms.
Look, stop that!
Chicken! Chicken!
Look, I'll have your leg. Right!
Right, I'll do it.
And they're just standing up there. So it's almost like these guys are like pre-Adam and Eve. They're like frolicking around like they're in the garden, like obviously like a wild animal who just grazed on a field of hallucinogenic mushrooms or something, not realizing they're naked.
Come here!
What are you gonna do, bleed on me?
I'm invincible!
You're a loony.
The Black Knight always triumphs!
I mean, it's really amazing to watch. I'm actually enjoying the spectacle too much. It's a little bit, I don't know if that's a good thing either. I don't know if I should be enjoying this so much, but it's like, what in the world is happening?
Oh, I see. Running away, eh? You yellow bastards! Come back here and take what's coming to you! I'll bite your legs off!
All right, so we're on the third here. So we're looking at a 4-note away major third. The major third represents the third position relative to the Lydian scale, which you could think from a modal chord construction would be chord number 6, or the Aeolian chord, which would be a minor chord construction if we built it from the A here, right? But when I look at this interval, I'm looking at the distance of the A to the home base, which is the F. So it's going to be a 4-note away major third. That is going to be the defining interval that tells us that it's a major mode. The Lydian is a major mode because it has a 4-note away major third as opposed to a 3-note away minor third. From a chord construction, that's going to be one of the ones included in the major part of our chord because we skip every other note. We go from the 1 to the 3, so we're going to have the same name convention from a chordal construction as with our note down here. Okay, let's go. Like it's going to be 4 notes away. So if I go on the same string, 4 notes away would be right there. So if I'm on this F, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom. All right, and then so if I go up, so notice also that we could think that the Lydian is a type of major mode. So oftentimes, if you're in a major mode, sometimes you can do like the bluesy type of thing, which means muddying up from the minor to the major. So the flat, in other words, the minor third would be flattened. So right behind it is the minor third. So so you could try doing something like that, sounding somewhat bluesy-ish, right? But note that, like, if you wanted to, when you're on the majors, sometimes you might think, like, I'm going to do kind of a bluesy thing. What do you do on the bluesy kind of thing? You muddy up the third, throwing in the minor third, leading it into the major third, leaning in on that a lot, and you can throw in converting from the major 7 to the minor 7. So a lot of times when I'm kind of noodling around in the major, I like to kind of keep those things in my mind. And I used to always think of it like from the perspective of like the major mode, the Ionian. But obviously the Mixolydian basically does that already. So if you're playing in Mixolydian, you already have the interval difference of the minor 7. So then you could muddy in the major 7 as you go home. And if you're in the Lydian, I haven't played with it as much in the Lydian, but I would think you can do the same thing. So, right, so that means that if you really learn this position, you can kind of tweak this position from a blues perspective, no matter which of the 3 major modes you're using. If you're in the major scale, in other words, then you'd be playing from the C here, and you would muddy up the third related to the C, and you can then add in the minor 7, right? Because that's not in, and that's going to be the 2 things that you can kind of tweak to convert it to more of a bluesy thing, right? And if you're in the Mixolydian, then you're already going to have the minor 7. You can add in the major 7 as kind of a blurry point that you kind of play with, and of course you have the minor third to the major third. And if you're in the Lydian, I would imagine you can do the same thing, although I haven't played with it quite as much, right? Because on the Lydian, it's the same as the major scale, except for that fourth. You got that weird fourth that has the augmented fourth, which is also could be the same distance as a 6-note away diminished fifth. So that means you could do the same thing you would with the C, basically muddying up the third, you would think, and then adding the minor 7 and kind of muddying that into it. Anyways, so let's go above it. So I'll kind of try to point that out as we go. When I go above it, we're looking for the inverse distance. So we're going to say this is going to be We're looking for the inverse distance. So if I'm looking for a 4-note away major third, 12 minus 4 is 8. So we're looking for a distance of 8. That, by the way, an 8-note away distance would be a minor 6th, noting that the inverse of a major is always a minor. Inverse of a minor is a major. So I'm looking for the inverse distance, which is 8 notes away. This is the fault line. So this tectonic plate shifted to the right. So this tectonic plate, I imagine it being in place because it's the bigger one, although it could move too. Maybe it's on softer ground than the small plate. The small plate might be the one that's staying still, and it's the big plate that's moving. I don't know. All I know is that I feel like the small plate moves to the right, And then, so that means that instead of going right above it for a distance of 5, I have to go diagonally, distance of 5. So 5, and I want to go distance of 5 instead of 4, because I can't count in 4s, even though I'm an accountant. I'm dependent on a calculator, okay? I use a calculator, and I'm not ashamed of it. I used to be. The old accountants come in, and they do stuff in their head, and they're like, da, 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 blah, blah, and they just do the math in their head, and it's like, whatever, that's cool. That's not how I do it, okay? I grew up with a calculator, and that's nothing to be, I'm not, anyways, 5 here, -5, -6, 7, and 8. So let's count it out this way. -5 here, 6, -5, 6, 7, 8. So there we have it. So top to bottom would be an 8-note away minor 6. Therefore, bottom to top from the F to the A would be a 4-note away, which would be a major third. So therefore, if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back. Where's the minor third? It's going to be flattened. Wait a sec. It's going to be flattened going this way. Boom. Okay. So if I want to muddy that up, I could try to reach back there. It's kind of a reach. Anyways, you can kind of play with that if you want to try to muddy it up. And, but I'm grabbing the wrong one here. Let me do that again. Anyway, all right. But if I didn't cross the fault line, I wouldn't cross the fault line. That's the only time I'd cross the fault line, going from the B up one string. Because if I was down here and I went up one string, let's do it, then I wouldn't cross the fault line. Let's go up here. If I was down here and I went up one string, I wouldn't cross the fault line. And if I was on the top continent and I went up one string, I wouldn't cross the fault line. So the rule is, if I go up one string, the 4-note away major third will be 3 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which happens on the B string, which you can see the tonic got pushed forward. So therefore, if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back, 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 baby. All right, let's go down to the next one. You see I had 4 backs there? I think I had 4 backs. You notice how I did that? I thought that was clever. I've been working on... Anyways, let's go up 2 strings. We're looking for the 4-note away major third. Inverse distance is 12 minus 4, which is 8. So we're going to go then, once again, -5, -10, and then 9, 8. So let's do that here. So we're going to be on this string, -5, -10, 9, 8 on that A. So top to bottom would be a 8-note away, which would be a major 6. Bottom to top from F to A, therefore, would be a 4-note away major third. Hopefully I'm saying major all the time. Major third. Okay, so that means if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be 1 fret forward. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started from the G or the D. It's only when I was on the A or the E that I could go up. I can't go up 2 strings from these two because I've run out of strings. So if I were here, for example, on this F and I went up 2 strings, it would be here. So the normal rule is if I go up 2 strings, the 4-note away major third is going to be 2 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the high-pitched E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be 1 fret forward. All right, let's go up another string here. Oh, by the way, if I flattened it, then we would flatten this way. So if I was muddying that one up, it's like, which finger should I use? Or this finger. And then I'm playing that G out. That G is a 9. That's kind of tensiony sounding. Anyway. Alright, let's go up to the next one. Altra vez. It's time to move on. Move on. What am I supposed to move on? Let's go back this way. Which way do I want to go? Well, you can see it's an equilateral triangle. We're right in the middle. So that means if so now I'm looking for the 4-note away major third going up 3 strings. So going up 3 strings. So it's I look for the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 4 or 8. So 5 going diagonal, 10, 15, only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 15 minus 12 is what I'm calling -3. -3, -4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or I can go the other way. This would be -5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is 3. -3, -2, -1, -0, octave. And then we go 12, 0 or 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. So this is an equilateral triangle. This is the maximum distance I would have to go, 6 frets, because that's right in the middle of a 12-note thing, right? So I'm going to say then if I go, this is going to be 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is -3, -3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So from this open to here would be an 8-note away minor 6. So from bottom to top would be therefore a 4-note away major third. Okay, so that means that if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets back, which means it's also going to be 6 frets forward. Now you might say, why do I memorize that? Because I'm never going to reach that far. Noting that most of the time it's not that far, because usually it's within 5 frets. So only one time out of all of them is it going to be 6 frets, right? Which is just out of reach. So yeah, you're probably not going to be reaching that far, but again, that's the longest distance. Now, what if I didn't cross the fault line? If I wouldn't have crossed the fault line if I go up 3 strings from this string. So I could go from this F and then go up 3 strings to here. Now notice that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's actually a reachable type of distance, right? And if I was building some kind of inverse chord, then that might be something I could throw in there, although still a little unusual because it is a bit of a reach. So the rule though, however, would be that if I go up 3 strings, then the 4-note away minor third is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the E, the B and the E string, in which case if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major, I hope I said major third will be 6 frets back, which means it's also 6 frets forward. It's right in the middle, equal distance. You might have a better chance going forward if you have to touch them both at the same time, although going back works here because it's an open string. You can always play the open string. So let's go down. Let's go up to the next one. So if I am on the next one, it's here. Now you might say, well, if I go to the top string, it would be easier to go to the bottom string and then mirror that on the top since it's the same notes, different octaves. So I could say, well, why don't I go down 1 string, the 4-note away major third? If I go below it, I don't need to take the inverse distance, but could just go a distance of 4. I don't need to go diagonal because the fault line isn't below here. Therefore, a distance of 5 is right underneath it, and then 4. If that's an A here, it's also an A up top, and therefore there it is. What if I count up the other way? It's going to be an inverse distance if I go the other way, 12 minus 4, which is 8. And then I have to go diagonal, which is 5, -10, -15. 12 notes in the alphabet, 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 5 is 8. So I can count it up that way. Let's do it here. 5, 10, 15, 15 minus 12 is -3, 3 plus 5 is 8. So boom, boom, top to bottom would be then, top to bottom would be an 8-note away major 6, bottom to top therefore would be a 4-note away major third. Okay, that means if I go up 4 strings, I'm going to cross the fault line because I can't go up 4 strings and not cross the fault line unless I think about going around the top of the guitar. Therefore, if I go up 4 strings, we'll always cross the fault line, and the 4-note away major third, therefore, will always be 1 fret back. No exception to the rule unless we go around the top of the guitar. But we're not thinking about that right now. So let's go below it. So now we're looking for going below it. So if I go below it, I don't have to take the inverse distance. I can just go for the distance of a 4-note away. So if I go right below it, it'll be 5 and then back to 4. So that's the shape we probably know best. Down 1, 5, back to 4. We probably don't play it down here as much, maybe not recognize it at the bottom, but might recognize it more on the top of the guitar if I was playing on the top 2 strings, that distance. Notice there's no change in the fault line, so that is what it normally is. Therefore, if I go down 1 string, the 4-note away major third will be 1 fret back unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the G string. So if I was on the G string, that F on the G string, and I cross the fault line, it would be on the same fret. So the rule is if I go down 1 string, the 4-note away minor third will be 1 fret back unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the G string, in which case if I go down 1 string and cross the fault line, the 4-note away major third will be on the same fret. Okay, let's just go to the next one. I'm going to try to crank out. Oh, the next one's the crazy one though. All right, get ready. Get ready for the craziness. All right, let's try to do... I won't do a joke since the last one was long. And so we'll say, all right, so now we're on the 4th. Now this, I've named this the 6-note away, and it says D5, which stands for diminished 5th, but that's just because my Excel worksheet is pulling in that information from a formula. You could call that, it's still 6 notes away, but we need a 4th, so we could name the same distance of 6 notes away as an augmented 4th. That's where the beauty and the problems come in from the Western naming structure. It's pretty cool because you can kind of, it has a lot of good features, but it also results in all these 2 names for 1 thing stuff, which is a little strange, right? It's a little weird. But that's the, so I'm going to say it's, I'm going to leave it as a diminished 5th, but remember, in the context of Lydian, we should be calling it an augmented 4th. Diminished means we just backed it down 1. So if it was a 5th, it would be 7 notes away, perfect 5th. But if I flatten it, 6-note away, diminished 5th. If it was a 4th, then it would typically be a 5-note away, perfect 4th. If I push it up 1, I get to 6, which would be an augmented 4th. All right, and then on the chord construction, it's an even number, so I also have weirdness happening here because when I build a chord, I go 1, 3, 5, and then 7. That's the last note in the alphabet. And then we go around to the 9, which is equivalent to the 2 that we skipped. And then we go to the 11, which is equivalent to the 4. So then I can call this a 6-note away augmented 4th, or a 6-note away augmented 11th. The other thing that's funny here is notice that if it's 6 notes away, that means that it's exactly half the distance. In other words, if I took the musical alphabet, if I went from F to G to the fret 1 through 12, fret 1 through 12, fret 1 through 12 on any of these, on any string, that's the entire musical alphabet of 12 notes. If I wrapped it around in a circle, then if I go clockwise around the circle or counterclockwise around the circle, 6 notes away will be exactly halfway around the circle, right? So that means that there is no, like with the perfect first, where if I went clockwise around the circle 12 steps or counterclockwise around the circles 12 steps, I'd be back at the same spot. Similarly, if I go clockwise around the circle 6 steps or counterclockwise around the circle 6 steps, I will be on the same spot exactly on the opposite side of the track, as far away from the root as possible if we think of it as a circle, right? All right, so that's kind of interesting. That means we don't really have to deal with inverse distances. It's always going to be 6 notes away, whether I'm above the note or below the note. One more thing of note here, and that is that the diminished or the augmented fourth is the funny interval. That's the interval that is really tensiony sounding. That's actually the interval that makes Locrian mode crazy. You know how the Locrian, when we build a chord, it has the diminished fifth. The diminished fifth is this same interval, right? So in other words, when we think of the modes, remember we're thinking that the normal modes are the major modes, and then the minor modes, and then the Locrian is crazy. We don't really play it or play in Locrian a lot, right? Why not? What makes it crazy? Well, it has a minor third, which is normal to a minor mode, but it has the diminished fifth. That's what makes it crazy. But the Lydian actually also has that crazy interval. It's just not called the flat five. It's not because but it still has it. It's the augmented fourth. So that's why so I would say the second craziest interval that no one really says is crazy, because it's in like the Hollywood family. It's in like the family of more upper class. I don't know, or they're in the cool group, so no one calls them crazy, even though they have the same crazy interval. It's like Hunter Biden, right? For a long time they're like, dude, the guy's totally not crazy. He's on the level, man. He's on the level. And it's just because he's in like the family where everybody knows he's crazy, but they still can kind of push that he's not crazy, Whereas like if he wasn't in that family, people would be like, dude, that guy's crazy. You know what I mean? That's what it's like, I feel like. Anyways, so let's do this. All right, 6 notes away. So if I'm going to be here, we can count up 6, which is going to be basically just out of reach usually. But if I go up forward, because it's higher on the guitar, we can usually reach it possibly up on this high in the guitar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So boom. So if I go from here to here, boom. See how the tension? Boom. All right. Let's go above it. If I go above it, usually we'd have to look for the inverse distance. The 12 minus 6 is still 6. So it's 6 notes away. So I go above the fault line, it's going to be 5, -5, and 6. There it is right there. There's the Locrian. So it's going to be -5 and 6. So if I went from top to bottom, it's going to be also 6 note away, which could be an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. And if I go from bottom to top, also 6 notes away, which you can call an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. But notice if I go from top to bottom, I'm thinking about the B as the root. So it would be a diminished from the point of view of the B. If I go from bottom to top, I'm thinking as F as the root. So it's still an augmented fourth or diminished fifth, but it would be an F augmented fourth or diminished fifth. If I look at it from this perspective of the B as my tonic, it would be a B augmented fourth or diminished fifth. All right, let's go up. So that means that if I go up 1 string, the augmented fourth, which could also be called the diminished fifth, or could also be called the 6 note away augmented 11th, is going to be 2 strings back if I cross the fault line. But I normally wouldn't cross the fault line. Like if I was here, I wouldn't cross the fault line. And like if I was like, let's put this color here, that's what I've normally been doing. If I was up here, I totally wouldn't be crossing the fault line. So normally, that's the shape we're normally used to for that really tensiony shape. It's in the box, what I call the box, the house. So that means, so normally, if I go up 1 string, the augmented fourth, 6 note away augmented fourth or 6 note away augmented 11th will be 1 string back unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up 1 string and cross the fault line, the 6 note away augmented fourth or 6 note away augmented 11th will be 2 strings back in that case. All right, let's go up another string. Got to pick up the pace. This is pulling too much time. This is ridiculous. What is this? Like a 12-hour long thing? And let's see. Don't worry, people. I pull everything together in the end. I pulled all the threads get sewn together in the 11th hour. Unfortunately, everybody falls asleep before the 1st hour. so no one sees it, how it all comes together like that. But still, I still think the fact that I pull it all together in the 11th hour still counts for something. Anyways, let's go up 2 strings and say we're looking for the 6-note away augmented 5th or 6-note away augmented 11th. So distance, 6 notes. It's going to be -5, -10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So boom. So if I start from here, this is going to be -5, -10, and then 9, 8, 7, 6. Whoa, wrong way. -5, -10, -5, -10, 9, 8, 7, 6. There it is. So if I go top to bottom, 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th, bottom to top, also 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th. But if I go from top to bottom, it's a 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th with the B as the root. If I go from bottom to top, it's still a 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th from the F as the root. So looking at the perspective of the F and the fact that it's an augmented 4th in the Lydian mode, if I go up 2 strings, then the augmented 4 and cross the fault line, the augmented 4th will be 1, 2, 3 frets forward. But I wouldn't always cross the fault line. Like if I was on these 2 strings, I wouldn't cross the fault line. So like if I was on like this F, then it would be here. So normally the rule would be if I go up 2 strings, the 6-note away augmented 4th, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the bottom E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 6-note away augmented 4th, which could also be called the 6-note away diminished 5th or the 6-note away augmented 11th, will be 1, 2, 3 frets forward. 1, 2, 3 makes perfect. I think that made sense. All right, let's go up to the next one. Otra vez. Otra vez. Do it again. Do it again. We're going to go 6-note away diminished 5th. All we have to do is have a distance of 6. It's going to be -5, -10, -15. There's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 15 minus 12 is -3, -3, -4, -5, -6. So let's do that from here. -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3, -4, 5, and 6. So top to bottom would be a 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th from the perspective of the B. Bottom to top, also a 6-note away augmented 4th or diminished 5th from the perspective of the F as the root. So that means if I go up 1, 2, 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 6-note away augmented 4th will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back. I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started on the F on the G string. So if I was on this F that's on that G string, then I would be going up. If I went up and then I go up 3 strings, it would be here. So the normal rule would be if I go up 3 strings, the 6-note away augmented 4th, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, will be 3 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the D and the E string, in which case if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 6-note away augmented 4th, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back. In that case, back, 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 baby. 4 backs. 4 backs. I don't even call it 4 backs. I just say back, 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 baby. Back, 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 baby. All right, let's go up to the next one. Now, if I go up to the top one, you might go to the bottom one and say if the top and bottom strings are the same, it'd be easier to go below it. If I go below it, I don't have to take the inverse distance, which I don't need to do anyways because the inverse is the same. So it'd be 5 right below it and then 6. If it's a B here, it's a B up top. So let's count it up top though, just to do our practice with it. -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3 plus another 8 plus another 5 is -8, -7, -6. Let's count it out from here. Otra vez. -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3. 3 plus another 5 is 8. And then that's 8. Wait a second. No, 7 and then 6. There it is. Okay. Here. So top to bottom would be a 6-note away diminished fifth or 6-note away augmented fourth from the perspective of the B as the root. Bottom to top would also be a 6-note away diminished fifth or 6-note away augmented fourth from the perspective of the F as the root. So that means from the perspective of the F, if I go up 4 strings, I will always cross the fault line, and therefore the 6-note away augmented fourth, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, which has the same distance of a 6-note away diminished fifth, will always be 1 fret forward. All right, let's go down below it. So if I go below it, once again, I don't have to take the inverse because it's always 6 notes away because it's halfway around the circle. Inverse is the same distance, so it's going to be 5 and then 6. So 5 and then 6, so 5 down and then 6, top to bottom is, whoop, wait a sec, is that right? No, that's not right. What are you doing? Wrong way, dude. That sounds too, that's not tension. There's no tension in that. It's 5 and then 6 going that way. Idiot. Hey, look, it's been like 5 hours here I've been doing this, all right? No need to get critical at this point, for crying out loud. I'd like to see you do this for 5 hours, see if you pull. Anyways, let's go. It's going to be -5 and 6. So that means that if I go down 1 string, the 6-note away the 6-note away augmented fourth, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, which has the same distance as a 6-note away diminished fifth, will be 1 fret forward unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string. So if I was on this F, for example, then it would be out here. So the rule is the 6-note away augmented fourth, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, which has the same distance as a 6-note away diminished fifth, will be 1 fret forward when I go down 1 string, unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string, in which case, if I go down 1 string, the 6 and cross the fault line, the 6-note away augmented fourth, which could also be called the 6-note away augmented 11th, which has the same distance as the 6-note away diminished fifth, would be 2 frets forward. Makes perfect sense.